So here we are on the fourth week of Advent, leading up to Christmas on Friday. And I'm going to spend some time looking at traditional English mincemeat and mince pies and a few other curlicues in there. As I got going, I got experimenting, and I now am flooded with various mincemeat pies and things, and so let's get cooking. Alright, so here's my mincemeat that I made, I think about 6 weeks ago. I got a little jump on Christmas and Stir Up Sunday. And normally I keep it for a whole year, but I've been moving around so much that that's not been possible. And I'm not going to give you an exact recipe here because I don't use one, but you can find plenty of recipes in various places. Basically, you combine raisins, golden raisins, currants, and some kind of candied peel, or in my case I used some dried tropical fruits. And for me, one of the most important additions is an apple chopped up fine so that the pieces are about the same size as a raisin. I used a Fuji apple this time, and then in this case I've got about a cup of brown sugar, and then all the usual suspects on the spice shelf: cloves, cinnamon, nutmeg, allspice, stirred all together and drowned in brandy, and then just let it sit, and every week just make sure there's enough brandy in there and let it sit and sit and sit. And now 5 or 6 weeks later it's ready for me to make mince pies. And you should add some kind of fat as well. Normally this amount of mincemeat would probably have about a half to a cup of shredded suet. I can't get suet, so I just use a stick of butter and I melt it and fold it in. That addition comes from the old tradition of using meat. That's why it's called mincemeat, because even going back into the Middle Ages, the pies that were made from the mincemeat were meat pies. But in the Middle Ages they often added fruit to their pies and also to their other meat dishes, not to roasts, but to anything that involved chopped meat. And over the centuries the meat disappeared or transformed into suet, and the fruit came to the fore and sugar was added. They didn't add sugar in the Middle Ages because sugar was enormously expensive, but they did mix the meat and the fruit together. So it's an old tradition that has gone through many transformations. So now I'm going to make several different kinds of dishes, including a whole pie, some little pies, some fried pies, and so forth. We're going to have a real chameleon cook's day with the mincemeat, and I'm hoping there's going to be enough left over so that I can keep it on hand for a year for next year. So let's see what we've got in store. I like to think of this as my truly lazy pie, and I make all kinds of pies this way. I'm using a short crust pastry, and it's in a circle which I've put in an earthenware casserole and made a kind of purse out of it, and now I'm going to put the mincemeat in the bottom, and then I'm going to fold the tops over and make what used to be called a coffin, and then I'm just going to bake it as is. I'll put a little butter and egg on the top just so that it browns nicely, maybe a little bit of brown sugar too. And I like this style because the ratio of mincemeat to pastry is a little more to my liking than the smaller ones, which I'm also going to make, but I have to do it in batches because I have a small oven. So let's put the mincemeat in. There you can see I put the mincemeat in about half full, I guess, because I need to have the pastry overlapping. So now I'm going to fold the top over to close it in and then bake in a moderately hot oven, probably going to be around 200 degrees centigrade, not sure. Alright, so there's the finished pie. You can see in the middle I've left a little air hole. It'll probably leak over the top anyway, not a particular problem for me. And now I'm going to pop it into an oven and bake until brown. All I'm doing is cooking the pastry. The mincemeat will just heat through in the process, but I'm not really cooking the mincemeat. The mincemeat is perfectly edible as it is. It's just the pastry that needs to cook. Alright, so here's the baked mince pie in its coffin. Still hot. I'm going to let it cool down, and I'm also going to make some whipped cream, which I will have with all the versions of the mince pies. I don't cut any corners at Christmas. I don't normally have whipped cream these days. I'm going to make some whipped cream, and I'll serve this up and the other versions with whipped cream. And here's the first slice of the big mince pie with some whipped cream. I'm going to yum this down right now, and then a little later I'm going to work on some other mincemeat recipes. This time I'm just going to make some classic mince pies using a pie tin, and these aren't quite traditional enough for me. They're muffin tins, so they've got straight sides, and the traditional English ones have curved bottoms. They're concave, but they're very hard to find, especially when I keep moving. I used to have them, don't have them anymore. I'm just going to make about 4 of these, and it's fairly typical. You cut a large circle to make the bottom, fill with mincemeat, then cut a small circle to make the cap on the top, and then bake in a hot oven, and all easy peasy. I'll just show you the steps very quickly, and you'll understand. Now this is the short crust pastry rolled out, and I'm using a glass to cut the big circles, and then a little cap from a spice jar to cut the small ones. Just have to find what I have. Normally in a well-equipped kitchen, of course, I'd have the right cutters, but these will do, and I'm just going to make the bottoms and the tops and then bake away. So here I've got 4 shells lined with pastry and filled up with mincemeat. They're going to spill over, I have no doubt. They always do. And I'm not making too many because I've already got that really big mince pie that's got about 12 pies in it. You're supposed to eat 12 pies on Christmas Day, one for luck for every month of the year. Most people don't manage that. So as you can see, I actually ended up with enough for half a dozen. So I've capped off the mincemeat, put a hole in the middle for steam to come out, and probably some juice will come out as well. I pop into a preheated oven at 200 degrees centigrade for about 20 minutes. Well, here we are fresh from the oven, and most of the lids have popped a little bit, which is not so much of a problem because they go down all the same. Although I could have crimped the tops a little bit tighter than I did. I'd be a little lazy. Not a baker, but you get the general idea, and you can probably do better than me. I'm going to let them cool a little bit. One of them I'm going to eat warm, not hot, because these are really hot, but warm with a little bit of cream, and then the rest I'll just dust with sugar and eat later. And here are the individual mince pies turned out, and I've already eaten one. So it's 5. I like odd numbers, and it's a very common principle of aesthetics that when you're setting out things like pies or potatoes or apples, onions, whatever, that an odd number is more aesthetically appealing than an even number. All right, I'm going to try one more thing, and I'm not sure how well it's going to turn out, because in Argentina I used to make fried empanaditas with mincemeat because I didn't have an oven. So I wanted to have mince pies, and so I made empanaditas. And this year I have spring roll pastry, and I'm going to see how that works. And my suspicion is not terribly well. I'm just going to make a few just as an experiment. Okay, so here's one experimental sort of not samosa, not mince pie, and I've got some fat heating in a skillet, and I'm going to fry it, and we're going to see what happens. My suspicion is it's probably going to explode and make a mess, but let's give it a try. Well, not a disaster yet. I've got it on high heat, and I'll flip it in a minute, and then we'll see what the result is. Well, I'm pleasantly surprised. I'm going to dust it with a little bit of sugar, I think, and let it cool a little bit. It's been in very hot fat, so it's super hot. And a little bit of cream, and I think it's going to be just delectable. And I'm going to be 10 kilos overweight. When all was said and done with the mince pies, I had some scraps left over, so I rolled them up into a circle and made a sort of Cornish pasty style mince pasty. So I've got a ton to eat, and it looks okay. I mean, apart from the slightly gaping hole in the middle. I'm not sure whether it's a pasty or a whale, but as my mother used to say, it all goes down the same way. So after all said and done, large mince pies, small mince pies, fried empanaditas, mince pasty. I still have about half a jar of mincemeat left over, which I've bottled up, and I'm going to keep until next year, because next year I'm going to do all of this again. I'm just going to make maybe half a dozen mince pies, or a dozen maybe, and there's more than enough there for that. So if you're still around next year, you can see what year-old mincemeat looks like. You won't be able to taste it, but I will. So there we have it, different ways of making mince pies, and I'm going to leave you with this scene of my Advent wreath and presents and candy canes and mince pies, making it very festive here. And meanwhile, please tell your friends, please like and subscribe. And I will see you actually on Thursday, I think, as well as Friday. I'm going to do 2 end of week videos, one on fish dishes for Christmas Eve, and one on my Christmas Day, including Christmas dinner, but other things as well, I expect, including chocolates if I'm not careful.